In today's episode, we're going to be talking to Joanne Knight, the wife of the inventor of the spinning Janny. What is a spinning Janny, you may ask? Well, it's a spinning kite, so stay tuned and we'll talk more about that. Hello folks, welcome back to Pine Meadows Hobby Farm. I'm your host Jerry Hansen. I have a very special guest today, and it's Joanne Knight. Joanne and I have been friends for about 29 years, and her husband have been working for years on the developing a kite called the spinning Janny. And this episode is really special to me. I've been planning this for about the past year. So this is Joanne Knight. Joanne, how are you?
Fine, thank you.
Okay, it's great to see you. I haven't seen you in a while. I wanted to point out that Joanne and I have been acquainted for almost 30 years, about 29 years to be exact. Joanne and Carl, her husband, have been really good friends of ours. And during our friendship, we watched a kite evolve. So, Joanne, kind of tell us a little bit of history about how the kite was born.
Well, it came out of the blue almost, but specifically out of my husband's heart and desire as a little kid. He had always thought about flying a kite, making a kite that would spin, as it were, perpendicular to the wind. So the wind doesn't just hit a blank sheet of paper and blow north when the wind is blowing north. He wanted one that would circle round and round opposite to the wind. On his heart when he was a little kid, had to be kind of pushed away over the years. He was in the Army, we got married, we had children. And then one day, I found him sitting on the hallway floor with a bunch of scraps, straws, and more significantly, a big sack of empty cow manure that we had used in our garden. Things were really quite tight financially, and that was the sum total of craft work stuff that we had. And I asked him very pointedly, "What on earth is this?" And he said, "I'm making a kite, the spinning kite I always wanted to make, and today I'm going to start." And I remember saying to him, "And then what?" And he answered, "I don't know, but here we go." And there he was on the floor with all this stuff, and we knew he wanted a barrel type kite, so the wind would go through it and it would spin again perpendicular to the wind. And that's how we started. And we did everything from triangles and paper bags, and always we came back to that big piece of plastic from the steer manure. Empty bag, stinky sort of, but it was all we had. We did not have the funds to go looking for materials that would be good. And this seemed to work, and in the end actually it did work. We were very fortunate. But it was a full year or more of one failure after the next to just get this in the air. And the secret, of course, was after many failures. My husband was reading the Bible, which was normal for him. Read in Zechariah the verse that said, "A flying scroll twice as long as it is wide." Ultimately, that's a paraphrase. But length to width ratio was 2-to-1. And in the end, my husband said, if 2-to-1 works for the flying scroll in the Bible, that's what we will start with. And that, when we made that steer manure bag into a 2-to-1 ratio, all we had to do after that was tinker with the air inlet, the air outlet, and that was a lot of tinkering because we did not have the math skills to do what needed to be done. It was put and take until we finally got something to fly in the sky. And my husband ultimately did that one night. He asked me, he says, "You want to go one more time?" And I said, "No. I am so tired of trying to fly a kite that doesn't fly. No more." And I stayed home. He went. He went to our favorite kite flying place, which happened to be behind the San Francisco Zoo. It was a great big empty field. And he put the kite up. It only takes about at the most a 3-mile-an-hour wind. You don't have to run with it. You just lift it into the air and it launches itself if it's right. And it was right this night, and it launched. He didn't come home for about 2 hours, so I figured it was just a total failure, but I was wrong. He'd gone to A&W, Root Beer Place. After the kite flew, he was so completely astonished himself that he sat down and had coffee at A&W until about 11 o'clock at night and came home. And I said, how bad was it? Because I assumed it had to be bad and that he had just kept tinkering. No, it flew. And that was the beginning of the spinning Janny. That's the bottom line day. Happiness.
And I remember him telling me about an encounter you guys had down while you were flying the kite of, I believe it was an engineer from NASA.
Yes, that was astonishing. We were flying at Fort Funston, and there's a highway that you can travel on, and you can see everything that's happening at Fort Funston. And a NASA engineer, a man who introduced himself as such, was on that highway, saw our kite in the air, a large one, and made a U-turn 5 miles down the road, came back, and wanted to know, this is actually what he said to Carl, where did you get that? And he had kind of hemmed and hawed a little bit about just being curious, but ultimately he pinned the question down, and my husband said, I made it. And I was there, and the man's mouth fell open, and he said, I don't see how. And then he said to my husband in just a real simple sentence, I'm the NASA engineer, and we've been trying to make this for a long, long time. What did you do? And so my husband was able to tell him, oh, you have to read your Zechariah, have a 2-to-1 ratio, and gave him the secret. And he gave him a kite, and the man was thoroughly, thoroughly impressed. That was a good day. Everybody's impressed when they see it, but that man was doubly impressed because of his attempts via NASA to try and make this work. No one had been able to do it before Carl did it.
That is an amazing story, which leads me to you guys hold 4 patents in the Copyright Office. How can you patent a kite if the Chinese, for thousands of years, have developed kites and have just about every patent of every conceivable kite in the world? What did you guys encounter when you were trying to come up with a patent?
We came against a little bit of a stone wall, and the patent officer actually called us and said that he was going to say that it was not patentable because, and that was exactly what he said. The Chinese have a market on this, and after thousands of years, he was sure that there was a kite that would spin perpendicular to the wind. And so basically what we said, if there is, tell us, show us where, what we've infringed on. And he could not. And he finally agreed that, to his knowledge, there was nothing. He just assumed that because the Chinese people have magnificent kites. I mean, things that are extraordinary, but they did not have one that was spinning perpendicular to the wind. That was the truth, and he had to acknowledge that, and we did prevail in that argument. There were others. We had to prevail on those too.
Yeah, I kind of remember something about another one that you wouldn't be allowed to use Bible verses in your copyright. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, that was another call from the examiner, and he was rather apologetic. I mean, he was nice, but he said, you can't refer to the Bible in a patent application. He says, somehow religion, you just couldn't weave that into the technicalities of a patent under U.S. patent law. And I don't know if that was actually true, but he certainly said so. And so we told him, well, the only problem with that is that you have as part 1 of the patent, what is the background of the invention? And so the truth is the background of the invention is my husband wanted to make this kite. We worked on it together. And the only way we ever found the final answer was the scripture from Zechariah. And so the man said, that's really it? That is really it. He says, well, then it's got to go in. And so in it went. And as far as I know, it's probably one of the few, if maybe the only, reference to scripture in the patent office. That was pretty fun.
That is amazing. You guys overcame so much with a very unique and interesting design. So this has been Carl's passion since he was a boy.
It was a dream when he was little. He used to think about it. In 1972, 73 is when he actually sat down on the hallway and tried to do it. And we got the patent. I believe the patent was in '77, the first one, right in there. And that happened to coincide with the massive heart attack that he had, which was, we had done all the work at the patent office before he had the heart attack, I believe. And then he had that massive heart attack, and by then the patent was running through the office, and we finally did get the actual patent with a number and put it on the T-shirt and everything. It was pretty fun.
Oh my goodness. What a wonderful, inspirational story about getting something from the Bible. I mean, after all, the Bible, the word Bible means books. That's what it means. And these are ancient texts that are compiled together in one binding. And what better resource than coming from an ancient manuscript that's equally as antiquities as what China comes up with?
If you wanted to look at, yes, if you wanted to just look at it from a secular position.
Yes.
There it is, and it's in print, and there's a scroll in Zechariah that's twice as long as it is wide, and that's the end of that discussion. There's nothing more to say. We just my husband picked up on that, brought it to me, and he said, this is where we're going to start. And I said, okay, because we'd certainly done 100, if not 500 different attempts at sizes and shapes, and they were all foolishness. I mean, in the end, we had a garage full of junk. It did not fly. This one, at 2-to-1, it did fly, and again, air inlet, air outlet, we really worked on that and perfected it.
Yeah, I sense a little bit more of a higher power at work here with helping your husband invent that kite.
I think God was extremely gracious, and it happened at a time, again, with his heart attack, and when he was ultimately going to take over as director for the San Francisco Gospel Mission. These are deep spiritual times. Much of our attention had to go to his health. Way more attention had to go to the mission by desire and by responsibility and privilege, and then to have this little token for good. And it wasn't really a little token. We considered it a big token, a joyful thing from God. My husband would never print out little cards about the spinning Janny without putting on the back side of the little card. On the front it would say it's the spinning Janny and the patent number, and on the back side it would say Zechariah's flying scroll and John 3:16, whosoever God so loved the world, whosoever believeth in him should not perish but have everlasting life. And my husband insisted on that. We would never just take the scroll and run with it. God blessed a lot.
I love that. So you guys got rewarded in more ways than one just by getting the patents and finally getting the patent office to see through and adapt to, there's scriptures in the Bible that help with inventions. NASA was helped with this. And then this kite, now I understand, has a place of honor in our nation's capital. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yes, only a little bit, because unfortunately did not save all the correspondence. We weren't really in this for a lot of glory. Over the years, people have said, well, do you have that paper? And the answer is probably we don't. But what I did have was a letter from, and I believe it was called the Smithsonian Institute, and they referred it to a museum of flight. And I don't know if Smithsonian runs it or is responsible. That part, that was back in probably the 70s, late 70s, early 80s, and after 30 years at the age of 76, I can't remember the whole thing, but it's there, and my husband was deeply impressed and very thankful, and he was hoping that the little part about it coming from the Bible as a beautiful resource would actually go with the kite. So someday somebody knows about the Museum of Flight. They could write and tell me what the rest of the story is. That's
amazing. What an amazing story. And you guys actually got to go fly your kite in the Washington Mall.
Yes, someplace, wherever it was in Washington, D.C., that they held a Smithsonian Kite Festival. I believe it was 1998. My son Chris went with Sarah, our daughter, and with Chris's grandson, Daniel. And they took the kites there. And they flew the spinning Janny on the field. Chris said when the littlest ones went out, I think Sarah took one out and Dan took one out, and they captured a picture of it. Actually, it looks like it's flying right next to the Washington Monument, but of course there's a long distance between where they flew, but the kite was so big, and the way the camera happened to catch it, there it was, side by side next to the Washington Monument. It's very beautiful. I think you may have that in the resource pictures. It was pretty fun.
That is amazing.
Big one. One of them was small. When he went on the field with what I call a pretty big one, but not the biggest. They do go to 21 feet easily, but a very mid-sized one, maybe 15 feet. Chris said when it went up in the air, there was an audible gasp from the audience. I mean, it was just so big, and it launches literally you just lift it into the air, and if the wind is blowing, up she goes. And there's not a much pull on it. You can hold it with one hand. A disabled person can fly this kite. You don't have to run with it. You wouldn't even have to run your wheelchair backwards. If the wind is blowing 3 miles an hour, up she goes.
I have, when I was researching this, some more on the spinning Janny to see how it evolved to this day, I discovered people are actually putting little generators on it, and as the kite spins in the wind, it generates electricity for them.
It does, and we had already done that out in the field there behind San Francisco Zoo. We didn't have access to stuff that was very lightweight, but my husband did find a pen light that he was able to Scotch tape around the bridle of the kite, and we did more than once send up a little, I guess you call them LED lights now, but I don't know what they were called then, but they were little tiny lights that you could buy, and we did put them on the kite and send them up. It's beautiful, and especially at night if the wind is blowing, it's pretty neat.
Oh, that's pretty cool. So my last question before we close here, Joanne, is how did this spinning Janny kite get its name?
Okay, spinning is easy. Spins like crazy and spins perpendicularly to the wind. So that was a simple one. Janny, that's my family name from when my little sister couldn't say Joanne. And so she would call me Janny, and the whole family just ended up calling me that. And to this day, I'm Auntie Janny to everybody, I guess. In fact, the name Joanne is very foreign to me because my whole family has always called me Janny. And when I'm at work, I'm always Mrs. Knight. I worked in a school with many children over the years, and I never was spoken of as anything other than Mrs. Knight. So the name Joanne is really, it's like you and me, because that's how we were introduced.
Yes.
Other than that, there are only a few people that really know me well enough to call me Joanne.
So there you have it, the mystery behind the name of why the kite is called the spinning Janny. And here's Janny herself, the name behind the kite. I want to thank you, Joanne, so much for taking the time out of your busy day and having this video conference with me.
This has been fun.
I'm glad you enjoyed yourself.
Thank you.
All right. I'm Jerry Hansen, your host. This is Pine Meadows Hobby Farm. I want to thank you guys for joining me on this very special episode on the spinning Janny kite. So I'm going to go ahead and go down the street to their farm that they have here in Southern Oregon, to their inventory of kites that they have stocked over there, and I'm going to go try to put a couple of kites into the air. It's a nice little windy day and it's fall, so we'll see if we have a little bit of success. Okay, I'm over here at the Knight's Ranch up here in the mountains of Oregon. And that building behind me, that's a factory that Caro specifically built to help him with inventing his kites. So what more appropriate place to launch this kite for you guys than in their field in front of his kite factory. So let's get a string attached to this and get it launched. Okay, well that was a semi-success with the kites. Please stay tuned to more videos. You can do that by subscribing, giving me a thumbs up, leaving a comment, clicking that bell icon that alerts you to new videos as I upload them. You can also click that share button and share my videos on your social media platforms. That helps promote our channel and introduce us to your media or people that you guys encounter. Also, you can follow me on social media. I'm currently posting to Twitter, Facebook, Pinterest, Reddit, Blogger, Tumblr. I'm also on Parler.com and LinkedIn. Thank you for joining us, and thank you, Joanne, for joining me on this special event. We'll see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.